I never used to think of myself as someone who scared easily. I'd done a lot of different jobs over the years. Warehouse grunt, line cook, delivery driver, the usual dead-end stuff. But this one job, the one I took just to scrape together a few extra bucks before rent was due, that one left me with something I still can't shake. It was about 6 years ago. I had just moved to a small, dusty town called Hemlock Ridge. I didn't plan to stay there forever, just long enough to stop bleeding money after a breakup that had left me with half my savings and nowhere to live. Found a room above a garage through a guy named Chris I met on Facebook Marketplace. Place wasn't great. Leaky ceiling, weird smells from the garage downstairs, but it was cheap and gave me a little privacy. That's when I picked up the night shift at a place called Valley Mini Mart. It wasn't connected to a gas station or anything. It sat right off the main road, wedged between an old pawn shop and a tire service garage that hadn't been open in at least 5 years. There was a faded, "Open till 3 a.m. sign in the window that barely lit up, and the inside was lined with dusty snack aisles and coolers that buzzed louder than they should have. My shift ran from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. Most nights were quiet. Honestly, it was easy money. Nobody really came in after midnight unless they were drunk, stoned, or just lonely and wandering. It suited me just fine. I brought books, listened to podcasts, and just rode out the hours. The store had cameras, but they were old and glitchy, and the manager, Sal, only checked them if there was a theft, which was rare. The first weird thing happened about 3 weeks in. It was a Monday night, slow even by Valley Mini standards. I hadn't had a customer for over an hour, and the clock had just passed midnight. I was standing behind the counter scrolling on my phone when the door opened and this guy walked in. I remember the sound of the door chime made me flinch because I was so zoned out. The guy didn't say anything. He walked in real slow, calculated. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a heavy, zipped-up coat even though it was spring, and he had a clown mask on. One of those creepy, exaggerated old-school kinds. Big grin, red nose, hollow black eyes. I just stared at him for a second. Thought maybe it was a prank. You okay, man?" I asked. He didn't respond. Just stood there, maybe 20 feet away from me, staring. "You lost or something?" I tried again, forcing a chuckle. Halloween's still a ways off. Still nothing. Just silent breathing through the rubber of that mask. The store's buzzing cooler sounded way too loud. I tried to make light of it. "Cool mask. You win the what the hell award for the night." He didn't laugh, didn't move, just kept staring. Finally, after maybe a full minute of the weirdest staring contest of my life, he turned, still facing me, and slowly walked to the other side of the store. He didn't touch anything, didn't look at the shelves. Then, without a word, he walked out the door and disappeared into the dark. I stood there, heart thudding. I don't know what it was about him, but something in my gut felt wrong. I kept looking out the window but didn't see him again that night. Next night was Tuesday. Things were mostly normal until closing. I locked up right at 3 a.m., same routine, same quiet street. The moment I stepped outside to head to my car parked behind the shop, I caught movement across the road. Under the streetlight, way down near the corner, was the clown mask guy again, just walking along the sidewalk. He didn't stop this time, didn't look directly at me, but my stomach turned when I saw him. I told myself maybe he was just some local weirdo, harmless. Still, I got to my car fast, locked the doors, and drove home without looking back. But the next night, that's when it really escalated. It was Wednesday. My shift passed slowly. Maybe 3 customers all night, all regulars I vaguely recognized. I was distracted the whole time, kept glancing out the windows. Nothing. At 3 a.m., I locked up again, flipped the closed sign, and headed to my car like usual. That's when I saw it. On my driver's seat, clearly placed there, was the same clown mask. I froze, instinctively backed away from the door. I thought he might be inside the car, hiding. I yanked open the door and checked the back seat. Nobody. But that mask was staring up at me, its painted-on smile way too wide. I remember whispering, "What the fuck?" to myself like 10 times. I picked it up, tossed it onto the ground, and drove home with every door locked and every mirror checked twice. Sleep didn't come that night. My mind spun trying to figure out how he'd gotten into my car. I usually locked it. But maybe I forgot. Or maybe he was good with locks. I started carrying a tire iron inside my hoodie after that, just in case. The next few nights were tense, but he didn't show up. No more masks, no weird visitors. I started to think maybe it was just some freak playing a one-time prank. Maybe he'd moved on. But then Saturday came. I was standing behind the counter around 1 a.m. when a guy came in wearing a hoodie, face low. Something about him felt familiar, but I couldn't place it. He lingered in the store too long, pacing, pretending to look at chips and energy drinks. He didn't buy anything. When he walked past the counter toward the door, he looked up, and I recognized his eyes. They were the same ones I saw behind the clown mask. He smiled at me, just a little. Not friendly, more like a threat wrapped in politeness. Then he left. I called Sal that night and asked if we had the cameras working. He said, yeah, they backed up to an old hard drive in the office. I checked them. Sure enough, there he was. Hoodie guy, clear face, clown man. I burned his face into memory. But the worst part? When I went outside that night to go home, my car had a sticky note on the windshield. It read, "See you soon, Night Owl." No signature, just that. I called the cops the next morning, filed a report, showed them the footage. They didn't recognize him. They couldn't do much without an actual crime, they said. Just a prank, probably, they shrugged. But I felt it. This wasn't over. I started parking down the street instead of behind the store. I changed my locks. I even installed a small camera in my car hooked to a portable battery pack. But weeks passed, nothing else happened. Until one night, maybe a month later. It was a stormy night. Thunder rumbling, lights flickering now and then. I was behind the counter, nearly falling asleep on my feet. Then the power cut out. The store went dead silent. The backup lights kicked on a few seconds later, just dim red glow strips along the floor and one above the counter. I pulled out my flashlight and was about to head to the breaker box when I heard the door chime. It worked even without power. Manual bell. I spun around, shining my light toward the entrance. No one was there. Just the door slowly creaking shut, like someone had slipped in and let it close behind them. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. I moved carefully, heart pounding. Aisle by aisle, I swept the flashlight across the shelves. Nothing. Then I looked up at the small convex mirror near the back wall, the one that gives you a fisheye view of the store. In the reflection, behind me, I saw a flash of red and white. I turned, flashlight raised, ready to swing. Nothing. But when I got back behind the counter, there it was again. The clown mask, lying flat on the counter. I hadn't seen it placed there. And behind it, on the scratchy black and white security monitor, was the frozen image of a man standing at the very edge of the frame near the cooler aisle. Just standing, staring. That was my last night. I quit the next morning, packed up my things from the garage room and left Hemlock Ridge behind. I don't know who he was, I don't know what he wanted. I never saw him again, not in person, not in my rear view. But I still check my car every night before I get in. And I never ever laugh at someone in a mask. Because some people, they're not trying to be funny. I was working 2 jobs at the same time, and I'll be honest, it was burning me out. But I needed the money, desperately. It was early 2022 when I started the second job, customer service for a mid-sized retail company that ran most of their support through a third-party call center. It wasn't glamorous, but they paid decently. The best part? It was remote. I didn't even have to leave the apartment. My name's Neil, and at that time, I was living in a rented 2-bedroom unit in a quiet apartment complex in Oak Hill, a town about 30 minutes outside Manchester. I used the second bedroom as a makeshift office. Desk, chair, lamp, headset. Clean and functional. I worked my main job during the day at a local print shop. But from 8 p.m. to midnight I was logged in, headset on, helping angry customers who never read the return policy. The work was dull. I averaged about 8 to 12 calls a night. Most of the time I'd just sit there refreshing news pages or watching videos on mute. Sometimes I'd bring my dinner into the room and eat during the dead stretches. That night, the night everything went sideways, was just like any other. It was a Thursday in late March. Cold wind outside, just a few light showers, nothing dramatic. I remember because I had to throw on a hoodie around 10. The apartment's heating wasn't great, and the guest room always ran a little colder than the rest of the place. I didn't get any calls for a good 30 minutes. That wasn't unusual. The lull always came around 10:30, and I was halfway through watching a video essay about vintage horror movies when the phone rang. The caller ID was masked, standard for incoming customer calls. I took a breath, straightened up a bit, and clicked accept. "Thank you for calling Brick and Bay. This is Neil. How can I help you tonight?" Silence. I waited a few seconds. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Then I heard a man's voice, flat, breathy. The audio was slightly distorted, like he was pressing his mouth too close to the mic. But what he said made the hairs on my neck lift. "I can see you." I blinked. "Sorry?" "I'm outside your apartment," he said. Then he laughed. Slowly. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was deliberate, exaggerated, like someone trying to make a creepy voice over the phone. I honestly thought it was a prank. "Okay, sir, this is a customer support line," I said, half chuckling. "If this is a joke, you've got the wrong number." "You're wearing a gray hoodie," he whispered. "Isn't that right?" I immediately froze. I was wearing a gray hoodie. Now, I know, gray hoodies aren't rare. But I was sitting alone in a second-floor apartment, away from the street view. My blinds were half closed. I hadn't moved from my desk for over an hour. I muted my mic and slowly turned to look at the window behind me. There were gaps between the blinds, thin slivers where someone might see through, but my room wasn't lit from the inside. It was only the screen that glowed. "How do you know that?" I asked, trying to sound firm. The voice laughed again. "Why don't you open the door and find out?" Click. He hung up. I sat there, not moving. My mouth was dry. My first instinct was that it had to be someone I knew messing with me. But no one knew my exact schedule except for my boss and my cousin, who wouldn't pull something like this. About 20 seconds passed before I got up from my chair. I moved toward the front door as quietly as I could. My heart was hammering. The hallway light was off, but I kept it that way. I leaned in slowly and looked through the peephole. Nothing, just the empty hallway. And then, knock, knock, knock. 3 solid knocks, from inches away. I stumbled back from the door, heart jumping into my throat. I didn't say anything, didn't breathe, just stood there, straining to hear. Another knock, then silence. I pressed my eye back to the peephole, nothing again. I waited. Maybe another 30 seconds passed before I backed up and turned to go grab my phone. And then, it rang again. My work line. Same masked number. I answered without speaking. More laughter. Then the voice came through, clearer this time. "Why didn't you open the door, Neil?" He knew my name. I tried to play it cool. "Who is this?" "You seemed brave earlier," he said. "But you didn't come to the door. That's disappointing." Click. He hung up again. This time I did the smart thing. I grabbed my personal phone and called the Oak Hill PD. I tried to stay calm, explaining everything. How I was working remotely, how someone had called me saying they were outside, then knocked on my door and now kept calling back. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and that they were sending someone over. I locked the door, deadbolt, chain, the whole deal, and turned off the lights in the hallway. I sat in the dark and waited. 10 minutes passed. No knock. No calls. I had just started to relax slightly when my headset rang again. Same number. My hand hovered over the answer button. I shouldn't have picked up, but I did. This time, no words. Just that same slow, wheezing laugh. Then silence. Then, I see the police. The line disconnected. Seconds later, a knock came again, but this time it was louder and faster. "Neil, Oak Hill PD." I practically ran to the door and looked through the peephole. A uniformed officer stood there. I opened the door, still feeling like I was in some kind of dream. He came inside, asked me what happened, and I repeated everything. He did a sweep of the hallway, then checked the lot below my window. No one. No footprints. Nothing. "Are you sure it wasn't just a prank call?" he asked. "I thought that at first," I told him. But then he said what I was wearing. He knew my name. The officer took down the call logs and my statement, told me to report if anything else happened. I didn't sleep that night. In fact, I barely slept for the next week. What happened? After I continued working the job for a few more months, but I moved my workstation to the kitchen, where there were no windows nearby. I also kept a bat under the desk. The calls never came back, not even once. I checked my call logs obsessively. I looked up how caller masking worked. I even got in touch with the company to see if they could trace it, but they said the call system only tracked general customer call traffic, not specific origins when masked. I never told my manager or my coworkers. But what really messes with me now is this. That job was remote. Nobody should have known I worked from home. The company had other agents, actual call centers even. There's no reason someone should have known my apartment was where I was taking calls. Unless someone had already been watching me. To this day, I don't know who it was, how they found me, or what their end goal was. But every now and then, when I hear a knock at the door late at night, I still get that same cold feeling in my stomach. I still check the peephole before even breathing near the handle. And I never, ever work nights again. I wasn't supposed to be working that summer. After dropping out of college for a semester, I told myself I'd just lie low, help around the house, maybe pick up a few shifts if I felt like it. But my mom had other ideas. She knew someone, Mrs. Green, who owned a little independent grocery store called Meadowmart just outside of our neighborhood in Elridge, a small city tucked between a few hills and surrounded by woods. She said they needed help during summer break. "Just night shifts," my mom had said, waving a hand like it was no big deal. A couple of hours after closing, you'd just be cleaning up and restocking. Easy money. I was 19, had no real plans, and the idea of working alone at night seemed kind of chill. Quiet, no customers, headphones in, get the job done. So I agreed. I didn't think much about it at the time. It was a small store, just 4 main aisles and a couple of fridges along the back. No fancy produce section, just basics. A couple of people worked the day shifts, but I never really saw them. I'd come in after the store closed at 9 p.m., get a checklist from the counter, and be left alone in the dimly lit building until I finished. Some nights I'd be done by 12:30 a.m., others it'd be pushing 2 a.m. It never bothered me, working alone. Not at first. June 17th, Tuesday night. It was hot that week. One of those suffocating Midwest summers where the air feels like it's pressing down on your skin. I had rolled up the sleeves of my shirt and brought a bottle of water with me, knowing I'd probably sweat through it all anyway. The store had weak AC after hours, part of Mrs. Green's money-saving policy, I guess. When I came in that night, everything was normal. The closed sign was flipped, doors locked, lights dimmed down to save power. Just the overhead aisle lights and a couple of small bulbs above the entrance. I clocked in, grabbed the list from under the register, and started with mopping. The first task was always cleaning the main entrance area. Front windows, counters, restrooms. Then I'd move on to stocking shelves and fixing any price tags. I had just finished mopping and was halfway through wiping down a small display rack near the candy section when I heard it. Footsteps. The first time you hear something strange while you're alone, you don't panic. You reason with yourself. Maybe it's something shifting, or the AC kicking in weird. That's what I thought at first. But this wasn't mechanical. This was slow, steady walking, somewhere beyond aisle 3. I stood still. There it was again. Step, step, step. I turned off my music, heart thudding now, and listened. It sounded like someone moving between the canned goods and dry food sections. I called out just in case. "Hello? Store's closed." Silence. That's when it started to get cold. Not in the temperature sense, but in that sinking feeling way, like your stomach knows something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. I moved toward the sound slowly, clutching the spray bottle in my hand like it could do something. The aisle was empty. So was the next one. I checked the whole middle section of the store. Nobody. I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Almost. But then it happened again. As I was restocking the spice shelf, I heard the footsteps again, this time behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I called out again, louder. "Hey, you're not supposed to be in here. We're closed." Still no answer. Just quiet humming of the freezers and the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. I reached behind the counter and grabbed the little metal flashlight we kept next to the register. Not for protection, just to help in case the lights cut out. Then I started walking the store again. This time I checked every aisle. Pantry, dairy, frozen foods. I even looked inside the restroom, the back storage closet. Nothing. Not a single person. It didn't make sense. I went back to stocking and tried to ignore it. I told myself I was just tired. Heat was getting to me. Maybe I had imagined the steps. That's when I saw something strange on the floor near aisle 4. A wet footprint. It was small, just one. No puddle, no trail. Just a single clear footprint in the dim light. Like someone had stepped out of the shadows, then vanished. That was when I should have left. But I didn't. I wish I had. June 18th, 1:15 a.m. It had been an hour since I heard anything. I was in the back now, organizing paper towels and napkins, trying to finish the last of my tasks. I just wanted to go home. I was bent down fixing a shelf when I heard it again. A single, heavy step, like someone shifting their weight just outside the storage room. I froze. Another step, then another. I stood up slowly, flashlight raised. "Look," I said, trying to sound confident. "I don't know what you're doing here, but I'm calling the cops if you don't come out right now." Nothing. I stepped out into the hallway that led to the walk-in freezer and the exit. And there he was. A man, tall, thin, maybe late 30s, standing at the far end of the hall. His clothes were dirty, oversized, and he didn't say a word. Just stood there staring at me. I took a step forward. "You need to leave." Still nothing. I took another step, and he bolted, disappearing around the corner toward the front of the store. I chased after him instinctively, heart hammering. But by the time I rounded the front counter, he was gone. But the doors were still locked. No broken glass. No alarms. No motion sensors triggered. The only way in or out was still locked from the inside. So where the hell did he go? I searched everywhere again. It took me 15 minutes. Finally, I checked the back again, near the dry storage room. There was a closet we rarely used, stuffed with old promotional signs and broken baskets. The door was slightly ajar. I crept forward, light in hand. I took a breath, shoved the door open. Empty. Just cardboard and clutter. No man. I exhaled shakily and reached for my phone. June 18th, 2:05 a.m. By the time the cops arrived, I was standing outside, keys in hand, refusing to go back in until they did. They swept the place. Took them half an hour. And then they found him, hiding in the crawl space above the storage closet. He'd been up there, watching, listening, God knows for how long. They said he must have stayed after the store closed and waited for the lights to go off before creeping around. He had no ID, no explanation. just mumbled nonsense when they pulled him down. They took him away. I never got his name. Never wanted to. I quit the next day. Mrs. Green was understanding. She even said it wasn't the first time something strange had happened at the store, which somehow made it worse. I didn't sleep for a while after that. The sound of footsteps in an empty building still makes my chest tighten. Sometimes I wonder how long he'd been up there, if he'd done it before, if someone else working a quiet night shift like me had ever just not made it out. But mostly I'm just glad I ran when I did. Because if I hadn't turned around in time, if I'd waited even a few more seconds, maybe you'd be reading about me on a missing poster instead of hearing my story. I used to work nights at a gas station just outside a small town called Willow's Edge. If you tried to find it on a map now, you probably wouldn't. Not because the place doesn't exist, but because no one's cared enough to update those maps in years. Willow's Edge sits way out on Route 9, about an hour and a half north of Clear Falls, surrounded by thick woods and cornfields that seem to stretch out forever. Most of the people who live there either never leave or end up vanishing into bigger towns like Bristol or Crosswater. Back then I was 23, and going through one of those stretches in life where everything feels temporary. I'd dropped out of college after a year and a half, mostly because I had no idea what the hell I wanted to do. My mom still lived in town, and my dad had been gone since I was a kid, some argument I barely remembered the details of. I moved back home for a bit, but after a few months of feeling like a failure under my mother's watchful eyes, I found a crummy apartment above an old hardware store and landed a job working overnight at the Corner Stop Gas and Market. It wasn't a 24-hour chain or anything fancy. Just one of those family-owned gas stations with a couple of old, clunky pumps, a tiny store that sold lukewarm coffee, stale snacks, and the kind of bait worms you find in styrofoam cups. Mr. Dorsey, the owner, was an old-timer in his late 60s who had worked at that place since before I was born. He hated working nights and figured paying a kid like me $8 an hour under the table was a fair trade. I didn't mind it, honestly. The town was dead after 9 p.m., and by midnight you could count the number of passing cars on one hand. Most nights I'd stock shelves, sweep the floor, and sit behind the counter watching whatever late-night infomercials were playing on the ancient box TV bolted to the ceiling. This was before smartphones were a thing, so the TV and the occasional AM radio station were about all I had to keep me company. The gas station sat alone at the edge of the woods with no streetlights around for miles. On clear nights, the sky stretched out like a blanket of glass, and you could see every star. On foggy nights, though, and there were a lot of those in Willow's Edge, you could barely see 5 feet past the glass doors. The woods would get swallowed up by that thick, wet mist, and it always gave me a kind of unsettled feeling. I'd tell myself it was just nature doing its thing, but there was something about those trees at night that didn't feel right. Everyone in town had a story about those woods, old legends about people who went in and never came out, about strange lights and noises no one could explain. I never believed in any of that crap, at least not then. It was a Thursday night in late October when the weirdness started. I remember because Halloween was coming up, and Mrs. Teague from the bakery had dropped off a box of pumpkin cookies for me earlier in the evening. It was one of those nights where the air felt heavy. Not cold exactly, but thick, like the kind of weather that promised rain without ever delivering. It was around 1:30 a.m., and I hadn't seen a car in hours. The radio was playing some old country station, but the signal kept cutting in and out with static. I was sitting behind the counter with my feet propped up on a milk crate, lazily flipping through a tattered issue of Sports Illustrated someone had left behind weeks ago. I just about nodded off when the bell above the door chimed. It was one of those old-school mechanical bells that let out a sharp, metallic clang every time the door opened. I jolted upright, half expecting it to be some drunk local looking for a six-pack, but when I glanced up, there was no one there. I frowned, set the magazine aside, and leaned over the counter to look through the front windows. Nothing. The pump sat in the misty darkness, and beyond them, the road was empty. The bell hadn't sounded faulty before. It was literally a piece of metal strung up with a wire. I stood up, grabbing the small flashlight I kept behind the register, and made my way around the counter. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking a little in the stillness. Nothing. The only sound was the faint hiss of the cooler fans and the distant chirp of crickets outside. I checked the aisles, walked past the racks of chips and motor oil. No one. The bathrooms were locked, as they always were after midnight. It was empty. I was about to chalk it up to a draft, even though the door had a heavy hydraulic hinge and shouldn't open on its own, when I noticed something outside. A figure standing just beyond the farthest gas pump. At first, I thought it might be a trick of the mist. But no, it was a man. He was just standing there. His posture was strange, almost rigid, and he wasn't facing the store. He stood sideways to it, looking off toward the tree line across the road. I remember thinking it was odd that I hadn't heard a car pull up. There weren't any vehicles in the lot, and it wasn't like anyone could have walked from town. The nearest houses were miles away. I pressed a hand to the glass, squinting through the reflection. "Hey, buddy," I called out, knocking against the door with my knuckles. No response. He didn't move. I could see he was wearing a dark jacket, something heavy like denim or canvas. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe older. His head was shaved, and even in the poor light I could tell he had on sunglasses, which made no goddamn sense at all at nearly 2 in the morning. My stomach knotted in that quiet, primal way it sometimes does when your brain registers something's wrong before you consciously realize it. I considered staying inside, just letting the guy do whatever he was doing, and hoping he'd leave. But a part of me felt like I needed to confront him, whether out of boredom, stupidity, or some misplaced sense of duty I couldn't say. I grabbed the old baseball bat we kept under the counter, unlocked the door, and stepped outside. The air was thick and cold against my skin. The mist swallowed up the sounds of the crickets, and it felt like the whole world had gone quiet. I approached slowly, the gravel crunching under my boots. "Sir?" I called again, a little louder. "You okay out here?" He turned his head slightly at the sound of my voice, though his face was still hidden by those dark lenses. "I need 1,500, he said, his voice low and rough, like sandpaper against wood. I stopped dead in my tracks, gripping the bat tighter. 1,500 what? I asked cautiously. He took a step closer. $1,500. Something in the way he said it made my skin crawl. Not a request, not a demand. Like it was something that was supposed to happen. Something inevitable. My hand started to sweat against the smooth wood of the bat handle. "Look, man, I don't have that kind of money. Nobody keeps that in the till overnight," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Another step. He was maybe 10 feet away now. "I need it," he repeated, firmer this time. That was when I caught a glimpse of something dark under his jacket. Not a gun, but something metallic. I didn't wait to find out what it was. "Back off," I warned, raising the bat. His face twitched, a brief grimace that showed yellow teeth in the weak glow of the overhead lights. I turned, bolted back for the door, and he lunged. I turned and bolted for the door, my heart hammering in my chest. The gravel crunched loud beneath my boots, and I could hear the man lunging after me, his heavy steps closing in fast. I fumbled with the lock, hands shaking as I finally yanked the door open and slammed it behind me, locking it with a shaky twist. Inside, the stale smell of coffee and motor oil hit me like a wave. I dropped the bat and leaned against the counter, gasping for breath, my mind racing. The bell above the door clanged wildly as the man tried to open it from the outside. I backed away, keeping my eyes on the glass. "Get off! I'm calling the cops!" I shouted, voice rough and desperate. The man's silhouette pressed against the glass, but after a few moments his banging slowed. Then, just like that, he stopped. The heavy mist outside swallowed his form again. I flicked on the outside floodlight, flooding the pumps with harsh white light. There was no sign of him. I grabbed the phone behind the counter and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The operator's calm voice was a small comfort. I gave my location and explained everything as clearly as I could. The dispatcher promised officers would be there soon. For the next 15 minutes, I paced the tiny store, listening for any sound beyond the hum of the cooler and the static on the radio. But the lot was empty, and the woods silent. When the sheriff finally arrived, his cruiser's headlights cut through the fog. He took a slow look around, then gave me a nod. "You okay, kid?" he asked. "Yeah," I managed. "But that guy, he wanted $1,500, said he needed it. I don't know why." The sheriff frowned. "There's been reports of folks losing cash to strangers out here. Maybe some scam or a drifter looking for trouble." He checked the pumps, the nearby road, but found no footprints or signs someone had left in a hurry. "Stay inside for the rest of your shift," he said. "If anything else happens, call us right away." I nodded, locking the door behind him as he drove off. After that night, I never saw the man again. The gas station stayed quiet, the woods looming just beyond the parking lot like a silent watcher. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and the radio crackles with static, I swear I hear that metallic bell ringing, even though no one's opened the door. I don't talk about this much, not because I'm trying to be mysterious or make it sound cooler than it was, but because even now, a few years later, the memory of it sticks to me like the damp, heavy air of that place. Back then, I was 25 and broke. I'd been drifting around taking whatever odd jobs I could find after I dropped out of community college. Mowing lawns in Boise, working the register at a liquor store in Twin Falls, hauling boxes for a moving company up in Spokane, that kind of thing. My truck was old, my phone was cracked, and I kept a duffel bag of clothes and a sleeping bag in the cab because there was no telling where I might end up on any given week. It was late September when I answered a Craigslist ad for a night shift position at a lodge in a small town called Valemont Springs, up in the northern panhandle of Idaho. The posting was weirdly vague. Looking for a reliable night caretaker. Minimal duties, quiet place, good pay. There wasn't even a phone number, just an email. I was living out of my truck at a rest stop near Coeur d'Alene at the time, watching the last of my cash disappear on gas station sandwiches and smokes, so I emailed them. Got a response an hour later asking if I could be there that evening. I should have known something was off by how eager they were, but when you're hungry and your tank's almost empty, your standards for self-preservation get a little loose. I rolled into Valemont Springs around 6:30 p.m. It was one of those dying mountain towns, a single gas station, a diner with flickering neon, and a post office no bigger than a tool shed. There was a cluster of old houses scattered around the hills, and beyond that just miles and miles of dense pine forest. The lodge itself sat at the end of a winding, unpaved road about 4 miles out from town. A faded wooden sign read, "Echo Pines Mountain Lodge," in cracked white paint. It wasn't much to look at. 2 stories of weather-beaten timber, a wraparound porch, and a parking lot big enough for 6 cars, though it was empty except for a beat-up white Chevy Blazer. The air smelled like damp earth and old wood. Inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule from 1976. Thick shag carpeting, wood-paneled walls, dusty old landscape paintings. The front desk was unmanned, a little brass bell sitting there on a doily. A guy came shuffling out from a back room a minute later. Tall, maybe late 50s, with silver hair pulled back into a ponytail and eyes that didn't quite seem to land on you when he talked. "Name's Earl," he said, extending a dry, bony hand. "You're the new night guy, huh?" "Yeah, name's Caleb," I said, shaking his hand. "Figured. Ain't nobody else dumb enough to take this gig." He chuckled like it was a joke, but his eyes stayed dead flat. He gave me a quick, half-assed rundown. Said there were 4 guests in the lodge at the moment. A married couple in room 206, an old-timer in 103, and a guy from California named Martin in 108. None of them were the kind to cause trouble, according to him. Main thing is, you keep an eye on the desk, answer the phone if it rings, and do a walk around every couple hours, that's it. Easy money. I asked about the pay, and he muttered something about leaving cash in an envelope at the end of the week. Should have been a red flag. I told myself it was fine. I'd be gone in a few days anyway. Earl left around 7 o'clock, said he'd be back in the morning and not to leave the property. I settled in behind the front desk, half watching a rerun of Walker Texas Ranger on a tiny old TV behind the counter. The guests kept to themselves. I saw the old guy from 103 come out for a cigarette around 9 a.m., but he didn't say much beyond a nod. By midnight, the place felt wrong. I don't know how else to put it. There's a kind of silence you get in those deep rural places. Not peaceful, not serene, heavy, like the whole world's holding its breath. I did my rounds, checked the side doors, the back stairwell, the utility room down in the basement. The lodge creaked and groaned like it was alive, and every now and then I'd catch the sharp sound of movement from upstairs. I told myself it was pipes or the wind, even though there was no breeze. At 1:45 a.m., the phone at the front desk rang. It made me jump out of my skin. I picked it up, half expecting it to be Earl or a guest needing towels. But no one spoke. There was just breathing. Slow, steady. "Hello?" I said, voice cracking a little. Nothing, just that breathing. Then, a faint, wet-sounding whisper. "You shouldn't be here." I slammed the receiver down so hard it bounced, told myself it was a prank call, though deep down I knew there was no one else out here for miles. I almost quit right then, but Earl showed up at 7 a.m. with a coffee and a pack of smokes like nothing happened. I asked him about the phone call and he just shrugged. "Forrest plays tricks on folks," he said. "Mountain air gets in your head." I should have left. But like an idiot, I stayed. Figured it was probably my own nerves. The second night started the same. Quiet. Boring. Then, around 11:30, the power cut out. Whole lodge went pitch black in an instant. I grabbed the flashlight from behind the desk, heart pounding. The emergency lights didn't kick on. I could hear Ranger's, soft whimper from upstairs. Yes, they had a lodge dog, a big old German Shepherd mutt who was usually too lazy to get off the porch. If he was spooked, something was wrong. I went room to room checking on the guests. All their doors were shut. No one answered when I knocked. The lodge felt like it was holding its breath again, that same thick, awful silence. In the hallway outside room 206, I saw it. A figure, tall, slouched, at the far end of the hallway, standing just inside the emergency exit. I lifted my flashlight and the beam caught its face, but there wasn't a face. Just slick, pale skin stretched tight like wax. No eyes, no mouth. It stepped backward into the stairwell. I bolted. Ran down the stairs so fast I nearly ate shit at the bottom. Ranger was waiting for me by the desk, tail tucked. I grabbed my keys, but the phone rang again. I shouldn't have picked it up. "You can't leave now." The line went dead. I drove out anyway. Left my duffel, my jacket, everything. I didn't stop until I hit a lit gas station an hour south, where I sat in the bathroom, shaking so bad I dropped my phone twice trying to call someone. I never went back. Earl left me a voicemail the next day, pissed that I'd abandoned post and that my pay was forfeit. I tried reporting it to the sheriff's office in Sandpoint. They sent a deputy out to the lodge. The place was empty. No guests, no Earl, no dog. It had been closed for 3 years. They showed me the records. There was a fire there in 2019. 4 guests and a caretaker died. The place had never reopened. I don't know what I saw in that lodge. I just know it was real. And some nights, when I'm driving those empty roads, I swear I hear a phone ringing in the dark. I never thought I'd be working nights again. A few years back, I promised myself I was done with graveyard shifts after a particularly rough stint at a hospital doing janitorial work during college. There's something about the dead hours between midnight and dawn that messes with your head. Even if nothing's happening, it feels like something could. Like the whole world goes quiet to let the dark things move around unnoticed. But rent doesn't care about old promises. After my hours got cut at the auto shop I'd been working at, I had to pick up whatever I could. That's how I ended up here, as a night maintenance worker for Clearview Office Supply Company. It's a medium-sized office in a business park on the outskirts of Mason Ridge, Iowa. Not exactly exciting, but the pay was decent and it let me keep my days open for job hunting. The deal was simple: 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. Monday through Friday. No one else would be in the building during my shift. Just me, a big ring of keys, a checklist, and the hum of old fluorescent lights. For the first couple of weeks, it was almost boring enough to be comforting, until last Tuesday night. I grew up in a town called Bloomfield, about 2 hours south of Mason Ridge. Population maybe 3,000 on a good day. My parents still live there, and so does my younger sister Lena. I moved to Mason Ridge 3 years ago with a girl named Tessa. We lasted about a year and a half before it all fell apart. Stupid fights about bills, my long hours, her drinking. One day I came home and half the apartment was empty. I stuck around because moving home felt like a step backward. Since then, it's been one job after another. Auto shop gigs, warehouse jobs, even a short stint stocking shelves at a hardware store. The truth is, I never really figured out what the hell I wanted to do with my life. Just sort of kept moving forward because it was easier than standing still. I guess you could say I'm good at being alone. That Tuesday, I was running late. There'd been a wreck on Route 14 and traffic was backed up to hell. By the time I pulled into the office lot, it was 8:13 p.m. The building was dark, save for a few security lights glowing in the main hallway. I grabbed my keys from the glove box, clocked in using the little touchscreen by the front entrance, and started my routine. Same as always. Empty trash bins, wipe down desks, restock bathroom supplies, vacuum the main areas. It's a weird kind of peace working in a place like that at night. No one asking you to do anything extra, no phones ringing. Just the quiet, broken up by the occasional buzz of the vending machine or the hum of the air conditioning kicking on. An hour went by like it was nothing. I was in one of the conference rooms dusting off the big oak table when I heard the front desk phone start to ring, which immediately struck me as weird. Nobody should be calling the office at 9:18 p.m. The place closed at 6, and besides, everyone who worked here either called me on my cell if they needed something, or just left a note for the morning. I let it go to voicemail. But a minute later, it rang again. Then again, and again. The fourth time, curiosity got the better of me. I made my way to the front desk, wiping my hands on a rag. The little green screen on the phone just said unknown caller. I stared at it as it rang a fifth time. Not my problem, I muttered, and muted the ringer. I figured whoever it was would give up. By 10 p.m., I'd nearly forgotten about the calls. I was upstairs in the small employee break room, pouring myself a cup of stale coffee from the old machine in the corner. It tasted like hot water with a hint of cardboard, but it kept me moving. I was scrolling through my phone, thinking about whether to stop at the gas station on the way home, when I heard a sound from downstairs. A single electronic beep. It was short and sharp, like the sound those office doors make when someone scans a key card. My stomach sank. I didn't have a key card. None of the night staff did. We used regular metal keys. Key cards were for management and daytime employees. I froze, straining to listen. A second later, I heard a door open, then the soft thud of it closing. I set the coffee cup down and stood by the break room doorway, peering down the empty hall. The overhead light flickered slightly. I told myself it was probably the security guard, Gene. He usually did a sweep of the business park around midnight, but maybe he was early. I called out, "Hello? Anyone down there?" For a second, nothing. Then, the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the front hallway. I took a step back into the break room. "Gene, is that you?" I tried to keep my voice steady. The footsteps stopped. Dead silence. After a few seconds, curiosity got the better of me. I leaned cautiously over the stairwell, looking down. A figure stood just inside the main entrance hallway, maybe 5 feet from the base of the stairs. I could only see the silhouette, tall, broad shoulders, standing deathly still. "Hey, you can't be in here, the office is closed," I called, my voice cracking slightly. The figure didn't move. Not a word, not a step. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. Then, like some awful movie cliché, the figure took a slow, measured step forward. The fluorescent light caught something in his hand. I squinted. A long, thin blade. A knife. I bolted back into the break room, shutting the door softly behind me. My hands were shaking so bad it took 3 tries to unlock my phone. I dialed 911. The dispatcher, a woman named Karen, answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? I whispered as quietly as I could, crouching behind the vending machine. There's someone in the building. He's got a knife. What's your location, sir? Clearview Office Supply, Mason Ridge. I'm upstairs in the break room. She stayed on the line with me, telling me to stay hidden and quiet. I could hear the guy moving below, slow footsteps echoing in the hallway. Every now and then he'd stop, like he was listening for me. The minutes felt like hours. Then I heard the front door open again. A voice. Police. Anyone inside, come out now. I didn't hesitate. I pushed open the break room door, bolted down the hall, and practically flew down the stairs. An officer, tall, bearded, mid-40s, stood by the entrance, gun drawn. I stammered out what happened, and he swept the building. No one. Not a damn trace. It wasn't until the next day that we got the tapes. The guy had come in at 9:10 p.m. using a keycard. There was no record of anyone authorized being there. He walked straight to the main hallway, stood at the base of the stairs, and waited, holding the knife. What made my skin crawl was that he didn't act like a guy looking for something to steal. He wasn't checking rooms or opening drawers. He was waiting. And when I called out to him, his whole posture changed, like flipping a switch. He held the knife tighter. The camera caught him standing there for 3 full minutes before slipping back out the front door, just as the cop pulled into the lot. The keycard? We still don't know how he got it. Management said none were missing. The cops checked with former employees, delivery drivers, even Gene. Nothing. I still work there. Bills don't stop and jobs around here aren't easy to come by. But every night, when I clock in, I feel a weight settle in my gut. I carry a flashlight now and I check every room twice. I never leave my phone out of arm's reach, and sometimes, if I'm sitting in that break room around 10 p.m., I'll hear it. That single sharp beep. And I remind myself, it's probably nothing, but I don't go check. Not anymore. I work night shifts at a roadside diner in a town nobody's heard of. It's called Marrow Creek. If you look it up on a map, you'll probably only find the name printed in small gray letters off the side of Highway 118, about an hour's drive south of Lincoln Falls. Not that anyone would have a reason to drive out this way unless they were hopelessly lost, low on gas, or running from something. My name's Damon. I'm 19, and I've been working the graveyard shift at Ruby's Diner for the past 7 months, ever since I dropped out of community college. I couldn't afford to keep going, and truth be told, I didn't have the drive to sit in classrooms for another 4 years. My mom wasn't thrilled when I told her, but she doesn't really have a say anymore. She moved out of state with her boyfriend last year, leaving me the trailer we used to rent together. Rent's dirt cheap if you can stand the stink of the nearby fields and the occasional pack of stray dogs howling through the night. I work from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., 5 nights a week. It's not glamorous. Most nights, the only customers we get after 10 are long-haul truckers looking for coffee and a slice of whatever pie hasn't gone stale yet. But the place has its charm, I guess. The walls are lined with faded black and white photos of Marrow Creek from the 1950s, back when it was a mining town. There's a jukebox that only plays old country songs, and the booths have this sticky, cracked red vinyl that peels in the summer heat. We're open 24 hours, but at night, it's usually just me and Brenda in the kitchen. Brenda's in her late 40s, chain smokes during every smoke break and curses like it's a second language. She's all right, though. Keeps to herself and doesn't ask questions. Some nights, we barely speak a word to each other. Just the clatter of dishes, the occasional whir of the milkshake machine, and the hum of the fluorescent lights. That night started out like any other. It was a Wednesday. I remember because Brenda always brings leftover tacos on Wednesdays from some Mexican joint her niece works at in Lincoln Falls. She was already there when I clocked in, leaning against the back door with a cigarette in one hand and a styrofoam cup of soda in the other. "You're late, kid," she rasped, blowing out a cloud of smoke. Yeah. The Accord wouldn't start," I muttered, pulling my jacket tighter around me. "Early October, and already cold enough to see your breath. Piece of shit car's gonna get you killed one of these nights," she said without looking at me. I didn't disagree. Inside, the diner smelled like burnt coffee and grease. Same as always. I grabbed my apron from the hook behind the counter, tied it around my waist, and got to work. Wiped down the tables, refilled the sugar caddies, made a fresh pot of coffee even though nobody was likely to drink it. The first few hours passed without incident. A couple of regulars came through. Earl, a trucker who always orders 2 grilled cheeses and leaves a $5 tip, and an old guy named Pete who drinks black coffee and talks about weather patterns like he's a meteorologist. After they left, it was just Brenda and me again. I was halfway through sweeping the floor when I noticed the headlights. Now normally I wouldn't have thought twice about it. It's a diner after all. People come and go. But this was different. These headlights didn't pull into a parking spot or the drive-through lane. They just sat there on the gravel shoulder of the road across from the diner, maybe 50 feet away facing us, the high beams on, motionless. At first I figured it was someone checking their phone or taking a piss behind the wheel. But the lights didn't dim and the car didn't move. "Hey, Bren," I called, leaning toward the kitchen pass-through window. "You see that?" She glanced up from her crossword puzzle. "See what?" "That car, out front." She stood, wiped her hands on a rag, and walked over. Together, we peered out the window. The glare from the headlights made it impossible to see the make or model. Just twin beams cutting through the dark. Brenda squinted. "Weird. Think it's one of Earl's buddies?" She shook her head. "Earl drives alone." We watched for another minute before the headlights suddenly cut off, plunging the stretch of road into darkness. Whoever it was, they didn't pull away. No engine noise. No door opening or closing. Just nothing. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I told myself it was probably a local taking a smoke break or maybe some couple arguing in the car. Happens more than you'd think out here. But as the minutes ticked by, a gnawing unease settled over me. The phone rang around 1:17 a.m. I remember because I glanced at the clock above the register. It was one of those old rotary wall phones, the kind you have to physically pick up and answer. I lifted the receiver, pressing it to my ear. "Ruby's Diner open all night," I said, trying to sound less on edge than I felt. At first there was nothing, just faint static. Then a voice, low, male, breathy. "Is it safe inside?" I frowned. "Who is this?" No answer, just breathing. "Listen, man, if you're playing around..." Click. The line went dead. I set the phone down, my hand clammy on the receiver. "Who was it?" Brenda asked, appearing beside me. "Some asshole, I don't know." She muttered something under her breath and went back to the kitchen. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was probably some drunk local with a sense of humor, or a trucker messing around on a CB line patched into the phone. But the feeling didn't go away. Then the power flickered. It was brief, just a second or two. The lights dimmed, the jukebox cut out, and the hum of the fridge stuttered. Then it all came back, but it was enough to set my heart pounding. "Damn power grid," Brenda called. "Storm must be coming in." I hoped she was right. But when I stepped outside to check the sky, it was clear. Stars everywhere. Not a cloud in sight. That's when I noticed the figure across the road. It was standing at the edge of the woods, maybe 20 feet from where the car had been. I couldn't make out much detail. It looked like a man. Tall, maybe 6 foot, wearing dark clothes. He didn't move. Just stood there, half concealed by the tree line. I took a step back. "Hey," I called, my voice sharper than I intended. "You okay out there?" No response. I stayed in the doorway, not daring to go further. Something about him didn't feel right. The way he stood so still, like a shadow waiting for something. "Damon," Brenda called from behind me. I turned to see her holding the phone. "It's for you." "For me?" She shrugged. "Said your name." I took the phone, my hands trembling. "Hello?" That same breathy voice. "Don't let him in." I swallowed hard. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but the line was already dead. I lowered the receiver and set it down, my pulse hammering in my ears. Brenda was watching me from the kitchen doorway, a frown creasing her face. "You all right?" she asked. I wanted to tell her no, that something was wrong, that every instinct I had was telling me to get the hell out of there. But what was I supposed to say? That a stranger called the diner knew my name and warned me about a shadow in the trees? It sounded insane even in my own head. "Yeah," I lied. "Just prank call." Brenda didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. She went back to scrubbing the flat top, and I forced myself to move. Wiped down the counter, checked the pie display even though no one had touched it in hours. Anything to keep my hands busy. I kept glancing out the window. The figure was still there, still standing in the exact same spot, half hidden in the trees. Not moving, not coming closer. Just watching. I didn't know what the hell to do. Should I call the cops? Tell Brenda? Lock the doors? But a part of me worried that acknowledging it made it worse. Like if I just ignored it, the guy would wander off and it would be another weird, half-forgotten story you tell years later at a bar. That illusion shattered when the back door rattled. It wasn't a knock. It was a full-on, hard rattle. Like someone was testing the handle, pulling it, checking to see if it would give. Brenda and I both froze. "You hear that?" she asked, eyes wide now. "Yeah," I breathed. She grabbed the heavy flashlight we kept by the kitchen sink and motioned for me to stay behind her. Brenda wasn't the kind of woman who spooked easy, but there was a tightness around her mouth I'd never seen before. She approached the back door, the rattling already stopped, waited, listened. Then she flipped the deadbolt and cracked it open just an inch. "Whoever's screwing around back here, you picked the wrong place," she barked into the dark. Nothing. She waited a beat longer, then swung the door open fully, shining the flashlight outside. Nobody there. She stepped out onto the back step, the light slicing through the empty lot behind the diner. Just old oil drums, a patch of dead grass, and the dumpsters. No one. "Son of a bitch," she muttered, coming back in. "Was it him?" I asked. "I didn't see anyone," she said, locking the door again. "But if it's some crackhead looking to pull a stunt, we're calling the sheriff." She picked up the phone and dialed the number by heart. But it didn't ring. Dead line. Brenda cursed under her breath and slammed the receiver down. "That's it," she said, grabbing her coat. "I'm not playing games with some backwoods tweaker. I'm driving to the station myself." She made it to the door before I saw him. The figure, no longer across the road. Now, standing right outside the front window, inches from the glass. His face was pale, thin, sharp angles like it was carved from wood. No expression, just hollow eyes locked on me. Not Brenda, not the room. Me. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then he lifted one hand and tapped the window 3 times. Slow, deliberate. I wanted to scream. "Brenda!" My voice cracked. She turned. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. The man didn't try to open the door, didn't break the glass, just stood there staring. That same unreadable look. Brenda grabbed my arm. "We're leaving. Now." She dragged me toward the back. "But what about—" "I don't give a shit about the register, Damon," she snapped. "Let them have it." I didn't argue. The figure didn't move to follow as we slipped through the kitchen and out the back door. The cold night air hit me like a slap. Brenda's old pickup was parked by the dumpster. She fumbled with her keys while I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that pale face rounding the corner. But no one came. She unlocked the doors, we climbed in, and she peeled out of the lot, tires kicking up gravel. We didn't talk on the drive to the sheriff's station. I could barely breathe. The station was dark when we got there. Just one cruiser parked out front. Sheriff Canning was at the desk, half asleep over a pile of paperwork. Brenda stormed in, shouting about the guy at the diner, the phone calls, the deadline. Canning rubbed his face, sighed like we were inconveniencing him, and promised to send someone out. We stayed at the station till daylight. When they finally went to check Ruby's diner, the place was empty. No footprints by the window. No sign of forced entry. Nothing on the cameras but static, like the tapes had been wiped. The only thing out of place was an old silver dollar sitting in the middle of the counter, dated 1952. None of us could explain it. Still can't. I quit the next day. Brenda too. I don't drive past Marrow Creek anymore. And if you ever find yourself on Highway 118 after midnight and you see headlights waiting on the side of the road, keep driving. Whatever it is, don't let it in.